Welcome to Let's Talk Hope, a podcast series aiming to reduce the stigma around suicide. In this series, we speak to a range of people who've been affected by or with lived experience of suicide. I'm your host, Gemma Cutting, and in each episode, I'm joined by Professor Pooja Saini, lead of the Suicide and Self-Harm Research Group at Liverpool John Moores University.
I wanted to do this series to showcase the voices of people who have been brave enough to speak about their experiences and who are constantly inspiring hope in other people who may find themselves in a similar situation. I'm in a unique position as an academic expert in suicide prevention who has had the opportunity to speak with people with personal experiences of suicide and those involved in setting up suicide-specific community-based services. My role has been to ensure that these services are designed to work well for the people who need them and that they embed evaluation and research to show the impact of their work.
In this series, you're going to hear from a really diverse range of people who really illustrate that anyone can be touched by suicide, regardless of age, background, or gender. These are important and impactful stories that we hope will open up conversations about suicide. And if you know someone who you feel would benefit from listening to this series, please pass it on. This episode is all about barbers and suicide prevention, and we sat down to have a chat with Tom, Graham and Charlotte. Now, Tom and Charlotte are barbers and hairdressers, and they have developed and taken part in training for barbers and hairdressers about suicide prevention. And we had a really interesting chat about how that training works and why it's important, and removing the clinical aspect of having those conversations and making it much more intimate and personal, and about that intimate relationship between a barber and a client. We also spoke to Graham, who has experienced firsthand how important this is.
Yeah, I think this session was a real eye-opener for me as well. Even though I know it's really important to do suicide prevention in the community and to have non-clinical settings, I never thought about interventions that can be done with people who haven't been, aren't from a clinical background and who can be equipped to actually have those conversations and how powerful that might be.
Yeah, it's a really interesting take on it. So let's get into the chat. So we're joined by Tom Chapman, Graham Miles and Charlotte Marvel. Guys, thank you for joining us for this episode of the podcast. Tom, I'm going to start with you. So you are a barber and hairdresser and you've developed training for suicide prevention for people in your profession. Can I just ask, as a starting point, what made you want to do that?
Well, it all started in 2014 when I lost a friend to suicide. I was completely unaware that he was struggling. And it really hit me quite hard because I'd never really experienced mental health at all up to that point. I was quite lucky in that sense, I'd imagine. But there was a big moment when I was at his funeral at Torquay Crematorium, and it was so busy, I was one of the first people without a seat. So I was ushered to the front and I was actually stood next to him with his coffin, looking back at the crowd and looking at this full room of people overspilling out into the foyer. And it's quite a unique position to be in at a funeral. Normally it's an insular emotional event where you're dealing with your emotions and you're looking at the back of people's heads and the one person speaking. But I was there looking around the room, looking into people's eyes, looking at all these faces and all this sadness and this love for my friend Alex. And I just thought, how could he have all these people that love him so much? Yeah, he felt like that was the only option for him to get out of whatever he was going through, because I didn't even realize he was struggling. And I think that was one of the key moments that made me think I need to do something about this. I didn't know what I was going to do at that point. I needed to do something about it. And also when it's been difficult in the past 11 years since that moment of not wanting to continue this journey, that's always been a moment that I've kind of drawn from to drive me forward on this mission of suicide prevention and mental health support.
And how did you land on the idea of this training for barbers and hairdressers?
Well, I never set out to do this. This wasn't the plan. I basically wanted to do something. I was quite prevalent in the barbering industry. I knew a lot of high-end and top-level barbers from around the world. So I kind of I collaborated all of them. It was like herding cats, believe me, trying to organise a load of barbers. And we created like a lookbook of men's haircut images. The idea was we'd sell it to raise funds for Papyrus at the time. It would be in barbershops, like coffee table style magazine kind of thing with lots of images of different haircuts that these high-end barbers had done. But inside that, there would be messaging around mental health and suicide prevention and signposting. And that was kind of my original idea. And that was the Lions Barber Collective as it started. It was that collection of barbers. But actually, when I was talking to my clientele about what I was doing, they all, pretty much all of them said to me, "You've helped me through insert problem here." And I didn't realize that I was actually doing that. I didn't realize that that was something we did in the hair and beauty industry. We listen for about 2,000 hours a year. So we do this, we are pretty good listeners, and people come and tell us their problems, but I didn't realize how much impact that had. And then one of the guys came and sat in my chair and was actually suicidal, and from little to no training that I had at that point, was able to have a big enough impact for him to choose not to end his life. I'm happy to say he's still alive now and has got a family and a working business and his own home and all the rest of it. So that made me think, oh my God, how can we, if I had some form of training, and how many hairdressers and barbers have been put in this position daily without any kind of skill set that we were not taught to do that. We're taught how to cut hair. We have to talk to people and listen to people, because that's what, if we don't talk and listen to people, then it's a bit of a weird one. You wouldn't go to your mechanic and get him to change your oil and expect him to talk to you and entertain you whilst he's doing it. It's quite a rare situation. We are trained to cut hair, but we also have to entertain and build relationships with people because it's such close proximity. We're not taught how to do that. And so I went and did lots of training myself, everything from mental health first aid to assist to safe talk. And I just felt that it didn't really resonate with the hair and beauty industry as much. It wasn't in our language. It was very clinical. It was very diagnostic. And I thought maybe there's something, it's more about having a conversation and connecting the dots, building a bridge between the communities that we serve and resources that are available. It's more of a signpost, and it's not about turning people into doctors or therapists. It's just trying to empower and reassure and upskill the hair and beauty industry, because let's face it, the infrastructure we have is incredible. We're on every high street everywhere, from tiny villages to massive cities, and we're having these conversations daily, reaching the unreachable. So it makes sense to do that, and that's kind of a long-winded answer to why I started to train it.
And Charlotte, you've done this suicide prevention training. Why do you think that barbers and hairdressers are so well placed to have these kinds of conversations?
Wow. So you see your clients every, 8 weeks. It's long enough to notice changes in people. Obviously, friends and family are going to see changes all the time. We spend enough time away from that person to notice if there is a change. And where we do speak to people, we're sort of not nobody to that person, but we're not as close that they don't feel they can talk to us. And we can also ask questions a little bit more without feeling like we're treading on anybody's toes or we're scared to hear what they're going to say. Do you know what I mean?
I guess it is a unique relationship that you have with your clients. And it kind of, I suppose it's the same with like personal trainers and nail technicians. You have that one-on-one time. And do you find that people open up about things that they wouldn't ordinarily with other people?
Oh, yeah, all the time. We've got that power because you can't touch people nowadays. But when you're cutting their hair, you have to touch that person. So that person automatically feels safer and more trusting in your presence. So without you even really needing to say a lot or question a lot, they do just tell you whatever they're worrying about. Obviously, you don't get everybody that's going to open up to you. But no, I do find a lot more people speak than don't, which I think is really, really good and really important.
And Graham, you've been on the other side of this, haven't you? Would you tell us your story, please?
I am a byproduct of abuse is the easiest way to put it. I suffered from anxiety and depression since my teenage years, attempted suicide at 19 and stumbled quite a bit. I've known Tom off and on since we were both quite young and looking a lot more handsome than we do now. But yeah, I've known Tom for a very, very long time. So I have no hair on top of my head, but I had a great big beard at the time and I didn't know how to deal with it. And basically got hold of Tom and booked in for a beard trim and to have a conversation basically of how to deal with this new beard that I'd created. And the Lions had literally just started. I think it was about 6-8 months after the book that Tom was talking about earlier. And I just, just explained and was like, I'm struggling with this and I'm struggling with that. And it's to be the other side of it, you go and see your GP and your GP's got a 5-10 minute window to sit, and they sit there and they cross their arms and go, how can I help? And you stumble over your words. You don't know what to say. How do I explain how I'm feeling? You have that difference with a barber, or like you said, your personal trainers or whatever, where you have an intimacy with that person. I'm leant back in a chair and Tom is basically trimming my face as I'm, and you have a conversation. That conversation happens for 30, 40 minutes, and then, right, okay, I'll see you in 6, 8 weeks, 10 weeks or whatever else. And then it's like, oh yeah, last time you spoke to me about this. And it took it from feeling like it was just me against the world to me and a few other people against the world. And I think you get a different intimacy with your client than you do from a doctor to a patient. It's not clinical. It is just a chat and it is just a conversation. Why don't you listen to this? Why don't you try that? And, as blunt as I can say this, if it wasn't for Tom's influence in the way that it's been for the last God knows how many years, I probably wouldn't be the same kind of person that I am now. That guy is a byproduct of the environment he put himself in to step forward and say, I want to help my clients rather than just cut my client's hair. Basically, I'm probably still alive just because I go back to what he said and how we are as friends. He's not just my barber anymore. He's one of my friends. So to have that, it's a very, very different way of living to anybody else, basically.
How does that make you feel, Tom, hearing that?
You're going to make me cry, Graham. I think it's not been an easy path to take. I could have, at the time when this all started, I was traveling the world cutting hair on stage, and it was far more glamorous than mental health. And it's been very difficult. It's been lots of ups and downs. And as Graham knows, it works both ways. We talk to each other about all sorts of stuff now. So there's been a lot of times where I wanted to give it all up, especially when we've lost people to suicide. I think, what's the point? But hearing things like that and getting sometimes messages out of the blue to say that the training I gave somebody 6 months ago, a year ago, helped them save a life today, or something like that, it just really makes it feel like it's worthwhile. It feels like it's become my purpose, and it's not something that I'm going to give up on because of Alex and because of what happened with him, but also the impact we've had moving forward, and the fact I've got people around me who believe in what we're doing, like Charlotte. We just did the trainer course in Torquay, so we've got more people to deliver the training. This part there, was it last weekend, the weekend before, whenever it was?
Weekend before.
Yeah, and it was just amazing to see that these people from our industry believe in what we're doing and see that we can make a difference. And then to hear it from somebody like Graham, it just makes it all worthwhile. It's been very difficult and it has taken its toll, but it does make it all worthwhile.
And Tom, can you just explain, logistically, and maybe Pooja, you could jump in here as well. How does the training work? What is it?
Yeah, so basically I sat down with Dr. Peter Aitken, who is a psychiatrist, and he just retired from his role as medical director of Sussex. But I sat down with him to make sure that everything was kind of legit and safe and above board and correct. But I wanted to take it away from being clinical diagnostic, and you don't need to guess or work out if someone's got bipolar or PTSD, or that doesn't really matter. And a lot of people that are struggling with mental health may not have a clinically diagnosed mental health problem. They might be struggling with something currently that you can help them with. So I wanted to take away from that kind of space and make it more about safe conversation. So essentially we teach people to recognize the signs that someone's struggling, which comes down to basically changes in behavior. So people's changes in behavior means that something's happened. Therefore, we can then ask them a question. And what kind of questions do we ask them? So you recognize the signs and then giving people the confidence to ask the question, because we found that's the hardest part, right? I've had people come on the course who have said to me, I'm here because I lost someone to suicide and I didn't realize there was anything going on. I didn't notice anything. And then at the end of the course, I think I've had about 7 people now that have said to me at the end of the course, thank you for the course today. And you know what? I did recognize that they were sleeping a lot more than normal. I did recognize they were isolating, or I did recognize they were socializing more, but I didn't say anything because I was scared to ask the question. So we can recognize these signs and then give people the confidence to ask the questions and what kind of questions we can ask them. And then once you ask these questions, how do we listen well with empathy and without judgment? Because we're telling people to talk all the time. It's everywhere, isn't it? All the campaigns are about talking about your mental health, but is anyone prepared to or know how to listen and respond well when that happens? Because if someone opens up to you and you shut them down, that's even worse than them not talking to you, because it reaffirms that it's not okay to talk. So how do we listen and respond well? And then finally, how do we help that person find the help they need? So we're not trying to turn people into doctors or therapists. It's how can you help them reach the support that is available, keeping both yourself and the sufferer safe. So we recognize the signs, we ask good questions, we listen well, and then we help them find the help they need. And then we just finish off with the 5 steps to well-being. And we go through that and how you can keep yourself mentally well, because you can't pour from an empty cup. So it's important to realize that. And I think that mental health is something that's seen as something that happens to other people, because we only really seem to classify it as clinically diagnosed things, as I mentioned earlier, whereas we know physical health is a whole spectrum. We all know we've got physical health. It's everything from a sniffle and cough all the way through to cancer and heart attacks. And we know it's relevant to all of us, and we all know how to look after ourselves. Whether we choose to do it or not, we all know what we should be doing to keep ourselves physically well. With mental health, it's seen as something that happens to other people and something that we deal with when we get it, rather than, and I think things are changing, definitely. It's come a long way since I started the Lions Barber Collective, but I do think, it's really important to make sure that we are looking after ourselves, or putting on the oxygen mask before we help others, as they say on the planes.
Yeah, I think, when this project was told to me, I think it really hits the brief of what the Suicide kind of Alliance is trying to do globally, which is trying to make suicide prevention everybody's business, part of our communities. And I think when I heard about this work, the initiative is really good, what they're doing is really good, and what anecdotally they're finding is that this is having a positive impact. But in the research world and the academic world, you've got to show rigour in what you're doing. And obviously, if you're training in suicide prevention, one thing that's always important is to make sure that it's safe and that it's not causing any more harm, and that it's actually doing, what you're hoping it is. So when I was introduced to Tom, it was about having a look at how can we actually show the impact of this work and show it in a way that could then be presented to commissioners, to people who fund this type of training, so that it can become something that's part of the curriculum within training for hairdressers and barbers.
And Charlotte, you've done the training, and did Tom mention, are you now helping to train people as well?
Yeah, so a couple of weekends ago, there was 5, 6 of us, was there?
Yeah.
That went down to Torquay for 2 nights, and we did train the trainer. So we now deliver the training.
And how are you finding that?
I can't wait to start getting going. I've got a massive list of emails to send out, and it's just working through them. I'm really looking forward to just getting more people to know how to speak to people, and not necessarily hairdressers or barbers, but like corporate businesses. They can notice signs within staff members, or I don't know, people they see every day on the bus to work or whatever. So it's just getting everybody that could help more aware of the signs and how to approach the conversation. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to delivering the training.
And once you completed your own training, how do you feel like that impacted you at work and the way that you did your job?
So like Tom said earlier, naturally we do that with our clients, but it made me feel a lot more confident in speaking to my clients. Like in a way, I wanted them to have a problem so I could help them. I know that sounds really weird, but do you know what I don't want them to have a problem, obviously, but I want to be able to just help that person. So I felt a lot more confident and willing to help them and to question them. And I just felt a lot more comfortable with that person being in my chair, no matter what they were going to say to me.
Yeah, because you felt like you knew how to respond. I think it's interesting that, Tom, you mentioned there is a lot of conversation about speak up about your own mental health, but you're right, there isn't a lot of conversation about how to respond when somebody does bring that to you.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of things like, and I think we all do it and we've all done it. And maybe in the past, people will say, we feel uncomfortable, and they'll say things like, oh, it's all right for you because you've got this, or think about this, or, you're really successful in business, or, and I think the more we measure success by sort of fame and fortune. So if somebody's doing really well and they're earning lots of money in business, or they're on TV, or they're whatever level of fame or whatever it is, when they say they're struggling, it's almost like people will say, well, you can't be struggling because you've got this. There's people worse off in the world than you. But it's all relevant, right, to that individual and relative to that individual, because any success or whatever doesn't matter. It's what's going on with that person in that time. And I think shutting people down, people often do this, and I know we're doing it from a good place, trying to be empathetic. We'll say, I know how you feel, because when I went through, and then go and take the conversation in our direction about, I mean, everyone's affected differently. Like a breakup for me could be different to a breakup from Charlotte. So for me to go and compare my breakup and say, well, it was all right because I did this and it takes that away from them. So I think just being able to, if anything, I mean, just thank that person for speaking to you and telling you, because that's a massive honor. They trust you, especially, I mean, guys especially, because they probably haven't told anyone else that, And I think there's been many occasions actually where I've gone out, and the world record of this is 7 times in one night. I went out with my friend who just moved back from London for drinks, and I had 7 people come up to me when I was either going to the bar or going to the toilet. I mean, I live in Torquay, which is a small seaside town. They'll come up to me and say, "You're the mental health guy, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's right." "Well, I'm going through this." And they just offloaded to me. And that's amazing that they felt like, my poor mate was sat by himself half the night, but that's amazing that they felt comfortable to come and speak to a 6'3", 18-stone tattooed bloke in the middle of a pub or club or restaurant and just feel comfortable to offload me, because all I've done is say, it's okay to talk to me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try and fix and solve your problems. I'm not going to tell you you're doing something wrong or right. I'm just going to listen to you. And actually, a lot of the time, that's all we really need to do. I think people panic and feel they've got to fix and solve everything.
I agree. I've had that a lot with myself when people have come up to me to speak about anything to do with suicide prevention or their own suicidality, because that's happened. But I think another really important element of the research side of it as well, and what we're doing, is looking at the health and well-being of the hairdressers and barbers who are being trained as well. Because I think there's going to be an indirect consequence and impact of this training that's actually going to be really beneficial for them, because sometimes holding all that information that people are telling you day in, day out can be quite exhausting as well, especially if you're going home, knowing that someone's just disclosed something quite personal. You might be worried about their safety as well when you leave. So I think equipping the people who might be responding to those type of conversations is really important as well. So it'll be really interesting within the research. We're going to add an element where we do actually look at the health and well-being of the people being trained.
Yeah, I think that's vital. I think the supervision for the hairdressers and barbers, or some kind of support for them, or empowering them to know that it's okay to offload it, and confidentiality and disclosure and all those kind of things as well is vital, because I know that you see 12 people a day maybe cutting their hair, and they all tell you all these issues, and then you go home and you see your partner or your housemates and they want to talk, how was today? Oh no, I'm exhausted, I've spoken all day long, I don't want to talk to anyone else. And then you just carry all these people's emotions and thoughts and worries on your shoulders all the time. And if you're a Samaritan, you have to offload before you finish your shift. If you are a therapist, you have to have therapy. If you're a hairdresser or a barber, you're seeing probably more people and having more conversations about that you don't have any support. So I think that, and making them aware that it's okay to offload, and things like Papyrus having that suicide intervention debrief service, things like that are available, and encouraging them to do so is vital, really, because I think if we can look after the hair and beauty industry, they essentially reach the rest of our nation.
Yeah, 100%. And Tom, why is it important to have contacted researchers and academics like Pooja to do this work with you?
I think we've got a lot of anecdotal evidence around this. We've got a lot of people I know that we've impacted. But I think if we want to I'm very passionate about the next generation and preparing them, because I know that when I went on, I was at Tony & Guy, so I was a hairdresser first, and I was 18. I was on a shop floor cutting people's hair, cutting women's hair and charging good money to cut women's hair, and stressing out about every section because you don't want to mess up a woman's hair. I mean, that's like literally the worst. So you're thinking about making sure this haircut's perfect. Next thing you know, they're going, oh yeah, so I'm going through the menopause, or I just had a miscarriage, or my husband's having an affair. I'm like, I'm 18, I'm trying to cut your hair, making sure I make you look gorgeous, and now you're offloading to me. I don't know what to do in this situation. So I think it obviously can be much more than that. And as I have experienced, I think it's really important that the next generation of hair and beauty industry are upskilled and prepared for these things. And I think if we can get evidence to show that this is effective, we can essentially make a huge difference. And if that's a real legacy piece over time, if we do this over a period of time in the curriculum of these hairdressers and barbers, how many years' time will it be until all the hair and beauty industry have this skill set, and therefore everybody has the access to these sort of conversations, and things will be picked up a lot earlier rather than getting to a point of crisis, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just before we go, Graham, Just from your own personal experience, how important is this work?
Phenomenal. I've seen both sides of it. So when the Lions started doing the pop-up shops, I work in logistics. That's my day-to-day job. Tom reached out to me and asked for help with setting up like the barbershops and driving vans and doing all the stuff that he couldn't do behind the scenes to make up there was a pop-up barbershop sorted so he could go and do his thing. So I saw that side of it as well as the personal side of it. But very early on in our friendship, I call it now, it's not really a relationship, it's a friendship. Tom just made an off-the-cuff comment that I was whinging, I've got 2 teenage kids and oh my God, I've got to do this and I've got to do that. And Tom just said something like, oh, it's not like you've got to, you get to. And just that simple sentence flipped how I viewed my day. I don't get up in the morning and think, oh God, I've got to go to work. I get up and think, I get to go and experience this thing, because if I'd have killed myself when I was 19, I wouldn't be. So that work on a personal level is phenomenal. Just an off-the-cuff comment from a guy that was trimming my beard changed my perspective of how I saw my family life, my work life, everything else like that. Seeing the work that he's done over the last, pre-COVID, basically, of all the stuff that we have done in helping, being the person that set up his barbershop and then stood at the back and watched what he did and seeing the effect he's had on other people, it's life-changing. It is massively, people are saving lives without realizing that they're saving lives because they just have a conversation. And it's personal, it's not clinical, it's not I'm sat there with a person expecting what medication are they going to put me on now. It's just a conversation. It's like, right, okay, mate, I'll check up in you 6 weeks. I'll see what happens the next time you come here. And then you come back and the conversation carries on. I mean, in my private life and in my personal life, I've messaged Tom when I'm having, issues in my marriage or issues with my kids. And the conversation is now both ways. He's gone through some stuff in the last 3 or 4 years and we've helped and it's gone forward. It goes both ways. And I think the barbers don't realize that it goes both ways. They don't realize that, it's not just a client. Friendships come out of this. Relationships come out of this. And, like Tom said, there's barbershops on every street. You can go anywhere and go and see a barbershop. And, I have the Lions logo tattooed on my left hand. And it's really nice that I was walking through a shop in Liverpool. I was getting tattooed in Liverpool and I walked down a shop in Liverpool and there was a barbershop and it had the Lions logo in the corner. And I'm like, that place has seen what we do or what Tom does and, is making an effect and it's all over the place. And I don't think, honest to God, Tom really understands the massive effect that he's had on people's lives. I love him for that. I don't think he ever gets him. He's the most humble guy I've ever met. But the team that he started and what he started, that's phenomenal. It's life-changing, but they just have no idea that it's life-changing.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Thank you. I totally agree. I think the work that you're doing is amazing, and that's why I'm so passionate about joining with you on this journey.
That's what I would say. Thank you both of you, all of you. I think it's teamwork, isn't it? I couldn't have done this by myself. Anyone who's been any part of it along the way has helped us. And when I started it, I said, if we save one life, it's all worthwhile. And I now know that we've saved multiple, from moments of crisis to, just aiding people along the way and keeping them on track. It's amazing the power of a haircut, essentially. And I think it upsets me, but it frustrates me the perceived value of hairdressers and barbers. People often say, I'm just a hairdresser, I'm just a barber. It's a low-skilled, low-paid job. And actually, in fact, we're life-saving and having a huge impact across the globe, whether we realise it or not. So I think this also will hopefully make people see the true value of the hair and beauty industry as well.
Yeah, guys, the work you're doing is incredible. Well done. And that seems like a nice place to finish it. So thanks so much for joining us on this episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Let's Talk Hope, a podcast series aiming to end the stigma around suicide. Brought to you by Professor Pooja Saini, head of the Suicide and Self-Harm Research Group at Liverpool John Moores University. If you or someone you know has been affected by any of the issues discussed in this episode, please refer to the help and resources listed in the show notes for details of organisations that can provide support. This podcast was produced by Inabella Media and hosted by me, Gemma Cutting. Thanks for listening.